So Pia, thank you very much for coming on today. I'm going to talk to you about your career trajectory today and see what we can learn about having a research active clinical career. So could you tell us a little bit about your background today?
Yeah, so I did a PhD in New Zealand in the area of sort of childhood trauma, and I was working as a researcher to develop therapy guidelines for sexual abuse. And then I did a post-doctoral fellowship at Harvard University for 2 years, and then became a faculty member there for 3, studying sort of how trauma affects brain development. And then I realized that it was a lot of research bits, but I was really missing sort of frontline work. And that's when I was lucky enough to get on the DClin course, became a clinician, and yeah, and then worked as a clinician and now again as a researcher.
Okay, great. So can you tell us about what funding you've currently got at the moment?
So it's a clinical research career development fellowship. So I'm glad I got that out.
Okay, and who's that with?
So that's the Wellcome Trust, and it's a 2-stage fellowship. So the first 2 years are mentored, which is quite nice. You get a bit of support from colleagues, and both nationally and internationally. And then you can design the second phase, which is another up to 6 years. So it's an 8-year in total, but you have to deliver the first stage before being eligible for the second phase.
Okay, and have you got any tips for people who want to follow that pathway about how to get yourself into a position that you're competitive for funding and how to make that application alongside busy clinical life?
I think I sort of really get to appreciate in what a unique position we are coming to about as a DClin and doing research and clinical work, because I think we are sort of have the research competencies, but also do the frontline work and have a real insight. So I think capitalizing on being more translational, so thinking about what can we research and then translate into improving interventions, the ways to develop interventions. So I think that this is something that we are, as DClins, are really ideally positioned.
So practically what I hear a lot is people being forced to make a choice at the end of DClin. Either I go into a full-time NHS job and then I'm swept up by that and I have no time to think about research again, or the opposite, I have to go for a very dry academic job with no chance to have a clinical interface. How did you manage to kind of bridge that divide to get your work?
I think that really is that bit of is it an either or choice, and I think it's the both and and we could do as a clinician, good old DBT. But I think it is about doing good research. It doesn't necessarily always have to be with sort of larger funding, but you could also do that sort of work within your clinical services. So I think you can do a lot of good research within clinical services. So not just doing academic or only clinical work, but to thinking about how can we help services to be evaluated, improve what they're doing. And I think a lot of services are quite grateful for that. So I think utilizing those skills.
So obviously your track record helped you get the fellowship. Can you talk through a little bit about the application process and any tips you've got for people?
If I can remember, I was pregnant at the time. So I was pregnant, and then I decided I wanted to write a grant. I think I was missing the research side of things, because I do think that also while services do appreciate the clinical work, the research ideas that we bring to our clinical job, there's often not a lot of funding there. So I think 2 years out of the DClin, I realized I probably had to get a little bit more active to see if I can bring funding to do the work I wanted to do. So there is an application that's sort of a short application where you just outline new ideas. And there was some sort of international connections that they were highlighting they would kind of like. So I looked at other colleagues around the world, people that were good in the area that I was studying, and reached out and wrote the short application. And that's really doesn't take that long to prepare. And then they would invite a full application, which we get a bit more time for, and then you would have to do a budget, and that does take quite a bit of time. But I was working as a clinician and sort of teaching on the DClin at the time, so I was doing it in the evenings and on the weekends while being pregnant. So it's manageable, although my husband probably would say so.
But you have to put the time in, it's hard work. And it sounds like you reached out to other people that could support you.
And I think that's really key. I couldn't have done it. I wouldn't have found the fellowship scheme. I wouldn't have gotten the idea. I think you need some colleagues to brainstorm with.
And how are you finding the fellowship? What are the opportunities and challenges around it?
I think I'm quite grateful about it, because now I get to do what I love. So I volunteer time at the clinic because the research fellowship funds me full time. So I work a day and a half in the clinic at the moment, and then the rest of the time I work at the university. So really grateful to be able to do the research work that I love. Quite excited to be able to do this sort of translational approach. I check in with the clinicians. Is what I do as a researcher, is that actually going well? Does that make sense? I speak to the young people because I do research in self-harming young people with a history of sexual abuse. So they help me shape the ideas. So that's really great. I think doing both can sometimes be a bit challenging because you feel might be a bit isolated. So I think it's really essential to reach out to colleagues at the university to just make sure that you are staying connected.
And have you got any tips for people who haven't had that much of a research background before and are just wanting to start out on that trajectory? They're in primarily a clinical role. Where would you start if you were there?
I think trust your own research skills, because I think we all kind of always think we might not have all the skills that we need. So I think trusting yourself first of all, and then maybe either reaching out within your service to see if there is a bit of money or a bit of time to do some just meaningful clinical research out in the world. So that would be one way of doing it. And the other way might be to attach to a larger project. I think there are, at our universities, I can think of several larger projects where they look for clinicians with research skills to do some consulting work or just to get involved, because I think once you get involved with a research project, there's opportunities that can come from it. So I think it's reaching out to projects at the university that might interest you.
So people in the ivory tower are actually desperate for clinicians who want to get involved to keep them real and
they
on the
reach
ground.
out a little bit,
yeah.
Let you up there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else you think we should ask you or should know if we're trying to get research funding?
I think I've I had 2 years now of supervising students on the DCLEN in their research project, and I feel like students walk out going, "Oh, I'm traumatized by research. I'm never going to do this again." And I think to remember that it is quite hard work to do your research project as you're doing your DCLEN course, but you walk out with a lot of competencies, and I think that position that we're in, that doing the frontline work and having those competencies, should just not forget to maybe capitalize on that and get excited about this again. Because I think it can make a real difference, because what we do in the clinic is only as good as the research that's leading us. So I think that's really important to hold on to.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, Pia.